Welcome to the presentation, a simplified model for augmented sensation, defocus, experience and insperience. How can screens affect the motion? During the answer of the question, how can screens affect the motion? The augmented sensation plays a central role and is going to be defined during this presentation. We are assuming a simplified model for human perception, which concentrates on the signal exchange between body and consciousness. We are assuming the consciousness can receive signals from the sensor organs of the body. In order to keep it simple, we are assuming 6 senses: thinking, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching and hearing, which are illustrated using the corresponding symbols. Now we are going to define experience. A sensation with an external source is what we are going to call experience during this presentation. By focusing on the complete external stimulation of our body, our consciousness receives signals directly from the sensor organs. This is how we define a high-dimensional sensation. When we concentrate on our body, we create a sensation with a direct external source through the sensor organs. For example, when we visit a park. The next step, we are going to look at the defocus. We are able to focus on external stimulations, but we are also able to defocus external stimulations. For example, when we are watching a movie and we really dive into the fantasy, we shift our focus to a small set of the external stimulation of our body, and the other senses get defocused in our consciousness. For example, when we only concentrate on our eyes and our ears mainly, we only process a partial set of the external stimulations, and the rest of our body gets defocused. Therefore, our eyes and our ears have a stronger signal into our consciousness as compared to the defocused senses. This is our definition for a low-dimensional sensation. We are assuming the senses have an external and an internal representation, which means by making experience and memorizing the experience, we can recreate sensation in our consciousness using the memory from past external stimulation. This is what we call, for example, our outer ear and inner ear, or our outer eye and inner eye, and in a similar fashion we can create a representation of our whole body in our consciousness, which allows us to recreate a sensation from memorized external stimulations. Now we are going to define the word Insperience. Insperience we are going to call a sensation with an internal source. This means Insperience is the recreation of a sensation through internal representation of senses using memorized experience from the past external stimulations. In contrast to experience, which is a real external stimulation, Insperience is the recreation of sensation based on external stimulation from our subconscious. Using these three concepts of experience, defocus and insperience, we are now able to define the process of an augmented sensation. For example, when we are watching a movie, we are having a low-dimensional sensation because we are only processing the external stimulation of our body partially by mainly focusing on our eyes and our ears. This leads to a defocus process of the rest of our body, and when the defocus is happening, our subconscious induces a response through an internal stimulation by creating insperience for the defocused senses. So when we watch a movie, in the first place, we have a low-dimensional sensation, which is augmented using Insperience for the defocused senses. So Insperience is created as a response to the defocus of senses. And Insperience augments external stimulation with memorized sensation for defocused senses. This image now shows the whole process. The green arrows are corresponding to the focus, the external stimulation. The blue lines are corresponding to the defocus of the rest of the body, and the red lines corresponds to the augmentation of the external stimulation with Insperience as a response of our subconscious to the defocus process. And this is what we are going to call an augmented low-dimensional sensation. For example, when we watch a movie, we concentrate on our eyes and our ears mainly. When we're listening to an audiobook, we concentrate mainly on our ears. Or when we view images, we mainly concentrate on our eyes. So now this brings us back to our original question. How can screens affect emotion? In order to point out the potential of the effect on emotion when being exposed to screens, we assume that a sensation always affects our emotional state. So when we create a sensation in our consciousness, it has an effect on our emotional state. But now, when being exposed to screens, and when making experience without screens, we have two sensations with a different structure. The proposal now is, when we are exposed to screens, we always have an augmented low-dimensional sensation because the screen only partially stimulates our body. By concentrating on the partial stimulation, we imply a defocus process of the rest of our body, which in turn creates a response through our subconscious by inducing Insperience, which augments the low-dimensional sensation. On the other hand, when we concentrate on the complete external stimulation of our body, we are receiving much more direct signals through the sensor organs of our body, leading to a high-dimensional sensation. Both situations, from the point of our consciousness, are looking like sensations, but clearly they have a different structure with a different underlying process. So now let's look at this process a little bit closer. We are going to make an assumption by saying it's able to confuse experience and insperience. If someone confuses experience and insperience, the illusion of a high-dimensional sensation is created. So given the fact that every interaction with a screen is an augmented low-dimensional sensation, we only have a partial stimulation of our body through external influence. And now, if experience and insperience are confused, we take the internal response of our subconsciousness and equate it with an external stimulation. If this is happening out of the scope of the awareness, our consciousness has no information about this process being going on, and therefore, for the consciousness, an illusion of a high-dimensional sensation is created. So when being exposed to screens, there always is an augmented low-dimensional sensation, and if experience and insperience are confused, the illusion of a high-dimensional sensation for the consciousness can be created. If this is happening out of the scope of the awareness of the user, it can be dangerous because it implies a different state of emotion, knowing about the process or not knowing about the process. So now, given the fact that if insperience and experience are confused, the illusion of a high-dimensional sensation can be created, the question arises, what is the difference of the influence on the emotional state when being exposed to a high-dimensional sensation or the illusion of a high-dimensional sensation? Clearly, both situations are different, and there's a different underlying process for the creation of the sensation involving only external sources for the high-dimensional sensation and external and internal sources for the illusion of a high-dimensional sensation. This is the end of the presentation, and we are going to summarize. The proposal is that when being exposed to screens, an augmented low-dimensional sensation is created, which consists only of a partial stimulation of the body, which is augmented using experience from the inside, compared to a high-dimensional sensation where we focus on the complete stimulation of our body. This concept is illustrated in the symbolism on the right side, which is called the Ace of Screens.